Hey guys, what is up? This is Kazi. Today we're going to continue our series on how to play chess openings, and we are going to figure out exactly why is the center so important. So let's get straight to it. First of all, let's take this knight and let's put this knight on square h1. Okay, so now that we have this knight on the square h1, can you do me a favor and tell me what squares this knight can go to? And when you're saying chess notation, so which is, for example, the names of the squares like a8 and b8, I want you to do me a favor, and even if you're alone by yourself watching this video, say the squares out loud to yourself. So for example, if you think this knight can go to the square f2, then say f2. So name all the squares this knight can go to. Okay, I'll give you 2 seconds. 1, 2, time's up. All right, so this knight can go to the square f2 and the square g2. Sorry, g3. So this knight can only go to 2 squares right now, f2 and g3. Those are the only squares that I see. Now let's move this knight a little bit higher. Okay, so let's take this knight from h2 and put him on let's take him from h1, let's put him on h2. So he's on h2 now. Now which squares can he go to? So take your time and then let me know. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this knight can go to 3 squares. If you said 3, that's correct. And if you name the squares, that's even better. So let me put him on those, let me put the pawns on the squares that the knight can go to. So the knight can go to the square g4, the knight can go to the square f3, and the knight can go to the square f1. So now the knight can go to 3 squares. That's great. Let's take these off and let's see what else we find. Okay, that's interesting. Let's put this knight on h3. Cool, so now we have the knight on h3. What squares can the knight go to? And please say the notations out loud. I'll give you about 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. All right, time's up. The knight can go to the square g5. The knight can go to the square f4. What other squares can the knight go to? The knight can also go to the square f2. And the knight can go to the square g1. Great, so this knight on h3 can go to 4 squares. That's pretty awesome. Now I'm going to take all these pawns off once again. Let's take all these pawns off. Yeah, it's a very good idea to say the notations because notation is a very important part of the chess game. And the better you get at it, the better player you'll become too. So it's important. All right, so now that we have the knight on square g4, how many squares do you see the knight can go to? I'll give you 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. I see about 6 squares the knight can go to. So let's get started. I see that the knight can go to the square h6. The knight can go to the square f6. The knight can go to the square e5. This is not an exercise in learning how the knight moves, though that would be a great way to exercise that. There's a bigger point to this, so stay with me here. All right, the knight can go to the square e3. The knight can also go to the square f2. And are we missing a square? Yes, we are. The knight can go to the square h2, correct. So now this knight can go to how many squares? I count 6, yeah. So let me take all the pawns off now. All the 6 pawns off the board. And let me put this knight on the square e4. Now I want you to help me count how many squares this knight can go to. So why don't you start counting the squares and name all of them so you can practice some chess notation as well if you're a little bit more advanced player. Okay, I'm going to count 3 seconds. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, great. This knight can go to the square f6. Oops, f6. This knight can go to the square d6. The knight can go to the square c5. He can also go to c3. The knight can go to d2. The knight can go to f2. We're missing 2 squares. We can go to g3. And the last square is we can go to g5. Whoa! How many squares are those? I count 8 squares. That's a lot of squares. So some of you might have already known the knight can go to 8 squares, but the knight on e4 can go to 8 squares. So this knight right now is like an octopus or like a monster, right? That's fascinating. Just look at that, how many squares it can control. And the knight that we started off with in the beginning of the video, which was on h1, that's afraid of the monster on e4 because this knight on h1 can only go to 2 squares, f2 and g3. And this knight here can go to 8. So the point is the knight on h1 and the knight on e4 are almost completely 2 different pieces. Why? What makes such a huge difference? Simply the fact that one is in the corner and one is in the middle. If you are in the middle, you can control more squares. You can choose which side to go to. You can access both sides of the boards faster. So for example, if my knight is here and he wants to go to the king side, he can quickly go to the king side. But if the knight wants to go to the queen side, the knight can also quickly access the queen side. So putting him in a corner makes him very slow and lazy. Putting him in the center makes him really awesome. So that is why the center is so important. If you have to remember anything about chess, remember this lesson. Remember that the center is that important. And I think you will have amazing games after just understanding this. So that is it, guys. Please comment, rate, and subscribe. And share the video with everybody that you know or people that like to play chess. Or maybe don't share the video, and that is your secret of becoming a better player. All right, take care, guys. Peace out. Expired, and then just zoom into it, and it looks all disgusting and stuff. That's how I want you to see the moves on the side of the board. Don't play them.